Hey everybody, welcome to HSN Checkpoint. This is going to be a brand new video feature that we're going to be incorporating into our site over the next few months. So for example, what we're going to do every episode is take a look at a piece of classic video game history, such as a game series, a game itself, or a console. So I said for the very first episode, I'm going to take a look at a game series that holds a very special place in both the hearts and underpants of gamers all over the world. So get ready for more skinless dogs, ridiculous keys, combat vests, and mad fringes than you could possibly shake a Jill sandwich at. Let's take a look back at Resident Evil. Resident Evil, or Biohazard as it was known in Japan, was created by Shinji Mikami and released on the PlayStation way back in 1996. Resident Evil practically reinvented the survival horror genre as we know it today, taking the mantle from more classic horror games such as Alone in the Dark for the PC and the Atari 2600's Haunted House. Although it's well known for its gratuitous use of graphic violence, haunting soundtracks and claustrophobically static camera angles, what really sent waves of horror down our spines was the fantastically ridiculous voice acting and live action intro sequence.
Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Albert Wesker, Resident Evil.
I can't even look at a sandwich the same way anymore.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Resident Evil 1 follows the story of the STARS Alpha team who are sent to a remote mansion in the middle of Raccoon Forest after their counterparts Bravo team become missing after their helicopter crashes nearby. They would have been able to have headed home for a nice cup of tea after discovering their dead teammates if it wasn't for that pilot who decides to hot-foot it out of there, abandoning everyone, the prick. That's why you don't hire a pilot for your covert special ops team with a nickname of Chicken Heart. From then on, the story progresses between a handful of main characters. Chris Redfield, the gung-ho action man. Jill Valentine, the gung-ho action heroine, with bonus Master of Unlocking ability. Barry Burton, lovable oaf, also likes guns. Rebecca Chambers, the single most annoying sidekick in video game history, and I am including Sheva from Resident Evil 5 in that comparison. And Albert Wesker, a man who was clearly shadier than a trench coat full of sunglasses, and was also part of a Billy Idol tribute act on every second weekend. Resident Evil was also quite unique due to the fact that you could play two separate campaigns, as Chris or as Jill. The overall story arc was pretty much the same, but there was some very nice overlaps within the story that could only be seen from one perspective or the other. The gameplay in Resident Evil was designed to make you suffer and panic at every possible second. You couldn't move and shoot at the same time. Don't be stupid. You had a very limited number of item slots, even less if you played as Chris. And of course, every single bullet needed to be treated as if it was made out of solid platinum infused with the very tears of Christ itself. That's how rare the ammo was. And the storage chests. Oh dear God, how many of us would just break down into tears every time we opened a door and heard that gentle save room music and saw that big old typewriter in the chest lying in the corner, taunting us with its sexy item slots and perhaps the odd first aid spray. I think we all remember the very first cutscene. Yeah, you know the one. I remember one of the first times I played Resident Evil, I wasn't so much scared by the zombies. I'd been playing Doom for years. I was no stranger to shooting monsters in the face. But it was just the first game I played with the whole atmosphere, the music was just so unsettling. Even to this day, I can't listen back to some of those soundtracks without feeling goosebumps. I mean, just try listening to Moonlight Sonata now the same way after first hearing it in the game. That leads me on to another good point. I mean, can you imagine how hard it would have been working in an Umbrella-owned facility when even the most ridiculously easy tasks had to be accompanied by an over-engineered puzzle problem? I mean, can you imagine every time you wanted to cut your grass, you need to insert some sort of medallion into the lawnmower? Every time you wanted a piece of toast, you had to play a game of poker with your toaster. It was necessary though, and the strong blend of puzzles and logic smattered in between shotgun blasts and giant snakes is what resonated within a lot of gamers. It was one of the first games we'd seen puzzles to such a large extent within what could essentially be referred to as a shooter, although I use that term very loosely. It didn't take the rest of the gaming world long to take note of Resi's success, and before you could say Diamond Key, there were more and more survival horror games being released. Some went on to become massive franchises by themselves, such as Silent Hill, whereas others died on their feet, flopping and gurgling amongst their own bodily fluids. Take Cold Fear, for example. Resident Evil 1 was quickly followed by numerous sequels such as Resident Evil 2, naturally enough, and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, released in 1998 and 1999 respectively. Overall, the game mechanics remained untouched, but the sequels, especially Nemesis, tended to lean a bit more towards the action side of things than the original game did, seeing as they took place in Raccoon City itself and played host to a large number of locations such as the police stations, hospitals, parks, underwater sewage treatment facilities, etc., etc. The main characters introduced to us in those games were Leon S. Kennedy, Backstreet Boy / rookie cop, Claire Redfield, sister to Chris from the first game, and Jill Valentine again, who we'd previously seen in the first game, but this time she kind of forgot to get completely dressed. Whoops. The biggest game mechanic we run into, literally, in Resident Evil 2 and 3 are both T-90 and the titular Nemesis himself. Big brick shithouses with legs who stalk you throughout the entire game and randomly decide to do a bit of on-the-spot masonry work by continually crashing through walls right in front of you. Although a bit creepy the first time round, the idea tended to get a bit repetitive after the first few hours and never quite managed to scare me as much as that goddamn dog jumping through the window in Resi 1. The series took a bit of a turn in 2005. While it still had the mix of fantastic bosses and shuffling enemies, now infected with Las Plagas rather than the TRG virus, you couldn't really call them zombies though, and they ended up being more like drunk Spanish tourists who were wandering around picking fights with everything. Resident Evil 4 also introduced QuickTime events and was the first game in the series to say goodbye to the static camera angles of old, to be replaced with some good old over-the-shoulder third-person-y goodness. The more linear, cramped confinements of previous games were also opened up slightly more, even though the game was still a far cry from what we'd call free roaming today. This definitely gave the series a much needed breath of fresh air, however, and continued on with the fifth game in the series. Set in Africa this time, with a now seemingly steroid-addicted Chris Redfield, complete with upper arm muscles that make it look like he's smuggling two small children under his sleeves. Slap in the most brain-dead AI partner whose only saving grace is a bit of arse to look at as you're plodding through liquor guts, and that's the game in a nutshell. Fun, but they weren't reinventing the wheel at this stage or anything. Resident Evil 6 will be released soon, and it hasn't gathered a ton of interest so far, other than the fact that its logo looks very similar to a lady and a giraffe in a very rude situation. Flash forward to 2012 and a number of other spin-offs and main games that I've forgotten to mention, such as Code Veronica, Resident Evil Director's Cut, the Resident Evil remake on GameCube, Survivor, Dead Aim, Umbrella Chronicles, Outbreak, Gaiden, Zero, and Deadly Silence, and it's pretty clear to everyone just how much of a gaming powerhouse the Resident Evil franchise has become. Yeah, I know there have been movies as well, but I'm refusing to even mention them on here because they have as much in common with Resident Evil as a tyrant does to looking after a creche for small children. The CG movie Degeneration is pretty good though, and I'd recommend anyone to go and see it. Especially as there's no Mila Jovovich in sight, anyway. The Resident Evil series has also spawned everything from comic books and novels to underpants and special collector's edition leather jackets that cost over €1,000 to order. Yeah, I'm joking about the underpants, but not the jacket. Seriously, €1,000. Go look it up, I'll wait here. So, who knows what the future holds for the Resident Evil series, but I for one always remember the very first time I walked onto that balcony in Resi 1 and saw the corpse of Forrest Spear just lying there, eyes pecked out by crows. It was a moment that defined me and the course that my video game future would take. Also, it probably had something to do with my long-standing crow phobia. Anyway,
But
itchy
just
tasty.
take a look at this. It's Forrest. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my